The cell door shuts. And just like that, silence swallows everything. No voices, no footsteps, not even the sound of another man breathing. Inside ADX Florence, the most secure prison in America, silence isn't peace. It's punishment. This is where the most dangerous men in the world are buried alive, one step short of death. Each cell, a concrete tomb, where light barely touches the floor and human contact, is almost forbidden. A former inmate once said, "You don't live here, you just wait to disappear." For years, prisoners like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, stared at walls so white they almost seemed to hum. Others banged their heads against the steel doors just to feel something again. And when one inmate finally broke, screaming through the slot in his door until his voice gave out, the guards didn't rush in. They just watched through the camera. Because in ADX Florence, breakdowns are routine. But how did this place become the end of the line? And what really happens inside those walls of silence? Let's go back to where the LL began. It started in the early 1990s. After a wave of violent incidents inside U.S. prisons, murders, riots, and escapes, the government decided enough was enough. They needed a place that couldn't be broken, a place built to contain the uncontainable. So they built ADX Florence, deep in the deserts of Colorado, a fortress of concrete and steel designed not to punish the body, but the mind. The cells were small, about 7 feet wide and 12 feet long. Each one had a solid steel door, a small slit for food, and a narrow window angled toward the sky, so inmates couldn't see the outside world. They called it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. But even Alcatraz had a view. Here, the view is nothing, just a slice of light that never reaches. Your skin. Inside ADX, days don't pass. They repeat. Inmates spend 23 hours a day locked in their cells. 1 hour for recreation, alone, in a cage the size of a walk-in closet. Meals slide through a slot. Conversations happen through walls. And if you're lucky, you might hear the echo of a voice 2 cells away, a reminder that someone else still breathes. A former warden once said, "It's not designed for rehabilitation. It's designed for control." And he was right. Many men inside never touch another human being again. Some lose track of time. Some forget their own voice. One inmate wrote that he started talking to the sink, just to remember how words sound. Another said, "I can't tell if it's morning or night. My dreams feel the same as my days." And for those who can't handle it, the silence gets louder, until it drives them over the edge. In 2005, guards found an inmate curled in the corner of his cell, unresponsive. He had covered the tiny window with toilet paper, blocking out the last beam of light. When they opened the door, he didn't move. He hadn't spoken in days. He'd given up. Later, a psychologist who worked inside ADX said something chilling. Human beings weren't meant to live without sound, without sunlight, without touch. But ADX Florence wasn't built to care. It was built to contain. Even the air feels different, heavy, dry, stale, like it's been recycled too many times through too many lungs. Every sound echoes, the metallic click of a lock, the hum of a fluorescent light, and somewhere down the tier, someone screams again, but no one answers. Because inside ADX Florence, the only thing louder than the silence is your own mind. The deeper you go inside ADX Florence, the quieter it gets. Past the main corridors, past the solitary cells. There's a place most guards never talk about. They call it H Unit. But among inmates, it has another name. The Black Hole. It's where the most high-risk prisoners are kept. Terrorists, spies, assassins, men whose names once made headlines, now erased behind reinforced concrete and soundproof walls. Here, silence isn't just part of the punishment. It's the weapon. Inside H Unit, every movement is watched. Every breath is recorded. The lights never fully turn off, and the cameras never blink. One inmate, years later, said, "You don't walk in H Unit. You float through it like a ghost. You stop existing to the world and to yourself." The guards who work there go through intense psychological screening. Even they admit this isn't a normal prison. ADX Florence is built to erase human connection. Doors don't open manually. They open remotely from behind bulletproof glass. Guards and inmates rarely see each other face to face. Communication happens through metal, through screens, locks, and small square holes. Inmates are escorted by at least 3 officers, sometimes 4, each one holding a chain, a restraint, or a baton. Hands cuffed, ankles shackled. They shuffle like machines, not men. And in this secret wing, some prisoners haven't seen another human face in years. Not a friend, not a guard, not even sunlight. A former intelligence officer once described the H unit as a prison within a prison. The world knows it exists, but almost no one knows what happens inside. What little information has leaked comes from letters, smuggled out, written in tiny handwriting on paper scraps, hidden in legal mail. Letters that spoke of days blending together until reality felt like a rumor. One of those letters came from an inmate whose name still carries weight, Ramzi Youssef, the man behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. In his letter, he wrote, "They call this justice. I call it slow death." For the outside world, ADX Florence represents safety, the end point for society's most dangerous people. But for those trapped inside, it's something else entirely. A place where time has no meaning. A place that strips away your identity until all that's left is a body and a number. There are no fights here, no gangs, no riots, because there's no one to fight. Every man is alone, locked away in his personal silence chamber. The irony? Many of them once ruled over fear. Now, fear rules over them. One of the strangest stories comes from a correctional psychologist who worked in ADX during the early 2000s. She said some inmates start to invent entire lives inside their heads. They create friends, routines, even conversations, all imaginary. One man believed he ran a small cafe in his cell. Every morning, he would open it, serve imaginary customers, and close it at night. It was his way of staying sane. But others weren't as lucky. Some inmates began to harm themselves, just to prove they were still human, scratching messages into their own skin, writing on walls with whatever they could find, toothpaste, blood, or ashes from burnt paper. The guards were told to document everything. No one was allowed to intervene unless the inmate was at risk of death. Even pain became part of the schedule. For outsiders, it's almost impossible to imagine what complete isolation does to the mind. But one ex-guard described it this way. Imagine being buried alive, but someone keeps the light on so you never sleep. And in that light, reality starts to bend. Some inmates claim they see shadows move, reflections that don't belong to them. Others hear whispers through the vents, voices that sound like conversations from years ago. The line between memory and hallucination fades. One guard admitted that even he started hearing things. Faint sounds that shouldn't exist. Footsteps in an empty hallway. Doors creaking when every cell was sealed. He said, "You spend enough time in that building and you start to think the silence is alive." Even the design of ADX Florence feels intentional, as if the building itself was built to watch. The corridors are narrow and symmetrical. Every angle feels the same. You could walk in circles and never know. The walls are thick enough to muffle screams, but thin enough for sound to travel just far enough to remind you someone else is suffering, too. That's the cruelest part. You can hear pain, but you can't respond. You can't comfort. You can't connect. And that's how the system wins. Occasionally, the silence breaks. Not by voices, but by the sound of doors opening. When that happens, every inmate freezes, because it means one of two things: a transfer or an emergency. Once, a door opened in H Unit. No one knew why. For hours, the lights flashed red, alarms blared quietly, a sound like a heartbeat echoing down the hallway. Later, guards whispered that an inmate had tried to end his life, but there's no confirmation. Because in ADX Florence, truth never leaves the walls. Only rumors do. Even former Warden Robert had once called it a clean version of hell. He said, "It's not meant for human beings. It's meant to break them." Yet somehow, some inmates endure. They adapt to the silence like deep-sea creatures adjusting to pressure. They stop fighting. They start existing. One prisoner reportedly said, "The first year, I tried to escape. The second year, I tried to die. By the third year, I learned to disappear. Disappear not physically, but mentally. They would draw so deep inside themselves that even their thoughts become whispers. And then, one day, something strange happened. A light flickered in one of the cells. Just once. The power in that wing rarely failed. But this time, it did. Just for a few seconds. When the lights came back, a camera in cell 213 showed something unusual. The inmate inside was gone, not escaped, not missing. Just not there. His bed was still made. His food untouched. The metal restraints still hanging where they always were. The report was never released to the public. The guard said it was a camera glitch, a malfunction. But for weeks, whispers spread through the facility. Some said he'd been moved to another unit. Others said he finally found a way out in his mind. Whatever happened that night, one thing was certain. No one saw him again, not in the cafeteria, not in the yard, not in the logs. Just gone. That event changed the energy inside ADX. Even the guards felt it. They started speaking softer, walking slower, double-checking their corners. Because in a place like ADX Florence, where no sun, no sound, and no one exists, even silence can start to feel haunted. And as the doors slammed shut again, the question hung heavy in the air. If a man disappears inside ADX, did he escape the prison or become a part of it? The vanished inmate. When the lights flickered that night, something in ADX Florence shifted, not just in the systems or the cameras, but in the air itself. The silence that once felt cold and predictable now felt tense, like the building was holding its breath. For years, nothing ever changed inside those walls. Same routines, same faces, same voices echoing through the vents. But after that night, after the inmate in cell 213 disappeared, everyone felt it. Something unseen had entered the place, and no one could explain it. The official report claimed it was a camera malfunction. That's what the warden told Washington, and that's what went into the logbook. But the guards who worked that shift, they knew better. One of them, a veteran officer named Daniels, swore he'd walked past cell 213 just 30 minutes before the incident. He said the inmate was there, sitting still, staring at the floor like he always did. Daniels remembered because the man hadn't moved for days. Not a blink, not a sound. Then the lights went out, just for 6 seconds. When they came back, the cell was empty. The door was still locked. The restraints were untouched. No signs of tampering. No hole, no crawl space, no broken bolts. Just a bed, a meal tray, and silence. They searched every corner of the facility that night. They scanned the tunnels, the yard, the maintenance shafts, everything. Nothing. And in a place like ADX Florence, built with layers of concrete, sensors, and airlocks, that was impossible. No one had ever escaped from it. Not once. So how does a man vanish from a locked room in the most secure prison in America? The next morning, the inmates noticed something strange. Every few minutes, the power would hum, just a faint vibration in the walls, like the building was breathing heavier. Some said they felt a low tone through the floor, like a heartbeat under the concrete. At first, no one spoke about it. But then, whispers started spreading through the units. The rumor said the man from cell 213 had found a way to turn invisible. Others said he wasn't human at all, that the government had been keeping something secret in that cell for years. The truth was far less supernatural, but far more disturbing. 2 weeks later, a maintenance team entered cell 213 for cleaning and reinspection. Inside, everything looked the same, except for one thing. Underneath the metal bed frame, etched deep into the concrete, were dozens of scratches. Numbers. Hundreds of them. Days, maybe, or something else. But that wasn't the strange part. Among the numbers, the team found a message, carved so deep, the letters still held flakes of blood inside them. It said, "No sun, no sound, no end." The same words now whispered through every corridor of ADX Florence. A federal investigator was sent from Washington, Agent Rebecca Kane. She'd dealt with high-level cases before, but nothing like this. When she arrived, the warden handed her the incident file, stamped confidential. but the folder was almost empty. No photos, no autopsy, no inmate transfer record. Just one form, marked Administrative Reassignment. Signed, but with no name. She asked who approved it. No one had an answer. Every signature led to another blank space. It was like the paper had been written by a ghost. Rebecca insisted on seeing the surveillance footage herself. The warden hesitated, then led her into control room, a place filled with dozens of monitors showing every cell, every hallway, every movement. When they pulled up the footage from cell 213, everything looked normal. The inmate was sitting on the floor, head down. The lights flickered. Static filled the screen. Then, 6 seconds later, he was gone. Rebecca replayed it again and again, frame by frame. Nothing. No shadow. No glitch line. No movement. But she noticed something the others hadn't. Right before the lights went out, just for a fraction of a second, the man looked directly at the camera. His lips moved. No audio, of course. But when she zoomed in, she could read it. 2 words. It's done. That night, Rebecca requested all records connected to the inmate. Name David Knox. Convicted in 2001 for multiple armed robberies and 2 murders. Transferred to ADX after repeated violent outbursts in other prisons. But buried in his file, under redacted paragraph, she found something odd. A medical note from 2009, signed by a prison psychiatrist. It read, subject shows no emotional response, no fear, no remorse, claims to hear frequencies within the walls, believes the building communicates through silence. The note ended with a single warning. Do not isolate further. Possible auditory psychosis. Yet, isolation was all Knox ever got. Rebecca requested interviews with nearby inmates, those in cells 211 and 215. At first, both refused, but when she returned days later, the man from 211 agreed to talk through the food slot. He said, I don't know where he went, but I heard him humming, not like a tune, like a vibration, over and over, every night. She asked what kind of sound it was. The inmate hesitated, then whispered, like the walls were answering. Rebecca left the unit shaken. When she stepped outside, the Colorado sky looked unreal, bright, open, endless, the opposite of everything inside those walls. But even out there, she could still feel the hum. The more she dug, the stranger it got. Knox had filed multiple grievances about low-frequency torture before his disappearance. He wrote that ADX wasn't just isolating inmates. It was experimenting on them. His final grievance said, if I disappear, it means the sound finally took me. That grievance was denied. The file closed. Rebecca tried to contact a psychiatrist who wrote the 2009 note, but he'd resigned years ago. No forwarding address. No record of employment anywhere else. One guard told her quietly, that doctor used to say the walls breathe. Then one day, he just stopped showing up. They said he moved to Oregon, but we all knew nobody leaves this place the same. As the days passed, Rebecca's nights got worse. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those 2 words, it's done, and that same low hum she heard in ADX. She swore it followed her to her hotel room. At 3:12 a.m., she grabbed her laptop and played the surveillance footage again, paused, zoomed, listened. When the lights flickered, she realized something. The static wasn't random. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern. It repeated every 6 seconds. And when she slowed the playback even more, she could faintly make out a whisper buried under the static. A human voice. It was Knox, and he was saying something. You can't hear the silence until it wants to be heard. The next morning, Rebecca requested a second visit to ADX. But before she could return, she got a call from the Department of Justice. Her access was revoked. Case reassigned. No explanation given. She tried to protest, but the voice on the other end simply said, let it go. It's done. The same words Knox had spoken before he vanished. Weeks later, the incident at cell 213 was officially closed. The The cell was sealed and marked as under maintenance. No one was ever assigned there again. But the other inmates say that at night, when everything goes still, if you press your ear to the wall near 213, you can hear it, a faint hum, a whisper, and sometimes, if you listen long enough, you'll hear a voice say, "No sun, no sound, no end." The hum was faint at first, barely there, like a heartbeat beneath concrete. But by the time investigators realized what it was already too late, because whatever David Knox had discovered inside ADX Florence, it was never meant to be found. After Agent Rebecca Kane's case was shut down, everything about Cell 213 vanished, just like Knox himself. Files deleted, video footage locked away. Even the staff who worked that night were reassigned or retired early. But silence has a way of leaving traces. And one of those traces was a man named Daniel Webb, a systems technician responsible for maintaining the internal power and security grid inside ADX. 3 months after the incident, Webb started hearing it too, the same low hum, vibrating through the steel panels behind the walls. At first, he thought it was just the generators, but then it began to form a pattern, a frequency. Every night at exactly 3:12 a.m., the hum returned for precisely 6 seconds. The same duration the power went out on the night Knox disappeared. Daniel recorded it. He ran tests, analyzing the audio waves, the decibel levels, the magnetic pulses. And what he found didn't make sense. The frequency wasn't random. It was repeating, organized like a coded signal. It pulsed in intervals, mimicking the rhythm of human speech. When he amplified the signal and slowed it down, he almost dropped his headphones, because underneath the static, he could hear something. A voice. No sun, no sound, no end. Knox's last words, repeating in a tone that wasn't human, but not entirely machine either. Daniel knew what happened to people who asked questions inside ADX Florence. So, he didn't report it. Instead, he saved the recordings on a personal drive, hiding them in his toolkit. But the next night, the sound changed. This time, it wasn't coming through the walls. It was coming through the intercom. He unplugged his headset. The hum didn't stop. It grew louder, spreading through every corridor like an invisible wave. And then, just as suddenly, silence. The following morning, when Daniel came in, 2 guards were gone. No notice. No resignation. Their lockers cleaned out. Their names wiped from the shift roster. A week later, Daniel couldn't take it anymore. He contacted Rebecca Kane, now suspended for breach of protocol. She met him in a diner 2 towns away, the kind with flickering neon lights and old coffee machines humming in the corner. When Daniel showed her the recordings, Rebecca froze. It was the same sound she'd heard in her hotel room, the same one that had haunted her for months. Daniel leaned in and whispered, "It's not the power grid. It's coming from under the facility." Beneath ADX Florence lies a labyrinth of maintenance tunnels, power conduits, and old security lines built during the Cold War. Few people know they exist. Even fewer are allowed inside. Daniel had access, or at least part of it, and what he found there didn't belong in any blueprint. There were additional chambers, unmarked, sealed by electronic locks that didn't appear on any system map. Rooms with heavy steel doors and thick glass windows. Inside one of them, he saw rows of strange box-shaped devices bolted to the walls, each one faintly vibrating, emitting that same low hum. When he tried to take a photo, his flashlight flickered and died. Then the hum stopped completely. He said it was the only time he ever felt true silence in that building. Not peaceful silence, but empty, like the world had gone deaf. Rebecca listened, trying to piece everything together. The blackout, the missing inmate, the frequencies, the warnings. She realized that Knox had somehow found these tunnels, that maybe in his isolation, he'd started hearing what others couldn't, the vibrations running through the building. Maybe he hadn't disappeared. Maybe he'd been absorbed. They planned to go back together, one last time. Not officially. No paperwork. No authorization. Just 2 people chasing a whisper. That night, Daniel used an old maintenance pass to bypass the outer checkpoint. Rebecca followed, her flashlight trembling slightly as they entered the underground corridor. The air was colder than she remembered, not the kind of cold that chills the body, the kind that feels like pressure. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. The deeper they went, the stronger the hum grew. It pulsed through the floor, through the air, through their ribs. It felt alive. Finally, they reached a heavy steel door marked with faded red letters. R-block/restricted access. Daniel swiped his card. A green light flickered. The lock clicked open. Inside was a narrow hallway lined with metal panels. The hum was deafening now. Rebecca covered her ears, but she could still feel inside her skull. Then she saw them, the machines Daniel had described. Hundreds of them, each one pulsing faintly in rhythm, like 1,000 mechanical heartbeats buried beneath the desert. On one of the control panels, a small screen flickered to life. It showed text, coordinates, timestamps, and at the bottom, a label that froze them both. Project Echo. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. Every screen in the room turned white, and through the hum, a distorted voice emerged. At first, it was unintelligible, just noise. But then it began to form words. He finished what we started. Rebecca looked at Daniel, eyes wide. "Who?" she whispered. The voice answered, "Knox." The screens flickered again, showing a still image of a man standing in a corridor, his back to the camera, head tilted slightly upward. The timestamp read the same date as the night he vanished. But there was something wrong with the image. His outline was shifting, like his body wasn't solid anymore, like the air was struggling to hold his shape. Then the lights went out. Rebecca screamed for Daniel, but the hum swallowed her voice. The darkness pulsed, one long vibration that shook the floor. When the emergency lights flicked back on, Daniel was gone, just like Knox. Only his flashlight remained, lying on the floor beside a metal grate, its beams shining into the black. Rebecca crawled toward it, trembling. When she looked down through the grate, she saw something below, a faint glow, moving slowly like a heartbeat. And then, from deep within the darkness, a whisper rose up through the vents. No sun, no sound, no end. The same words, but this time she recognized a voice. It wasn't Knox. It was Daniel. Rebecca staggered out of the tunnel, gasping for air as dawn broke over the desert. She didn't remember driving, didn't remember how she got back to town. All she remembered was a hum, faint, steady, and endless. When she checked her phone later that day, a new voicemail appeared. No caller ID, just static and a soft voice saying, "It's done." Then silence. Weeks later, the government announced that ADX Florence was undergoing infrastructure maintenance. No one mentioned R-Block. No one mentioned the missing technician. And Rebecca? She disappeared too. Some say she moved away. Others say she never left Colorado. But truck drivers passing near the prison late at night still report the same thing. A low hum vibrating through the ground. And sometimes, if the wind is just right, a voice carried across the desert, whispering the words. No sun, no sound, no end. The man who broke the silence. For months, silence had ruled ADX Florence like a god no one dared defy. But one morning, everything changed. It started with a sound so small, most would have ignored it. A whisper, not from the vents, not from the guards, but from cell 113. Jackson froze. He knew that voice. It was Morales, the inmate who hadn't spoken in 2 years. The same man who once screamed for days when they locked him in isolation and then stopped. Some said he went mad. Others said he gave up. But now his voice had returned. At first, it was soft, like someone talking in his sleep. Then it grew louder, clearer. Words started to form through the vents. They can't silence the walls forever. Jackson sat up from his concrete bed, his heart racing. He pressed his ear against the vent. "Morales," he whispered. No answer. Then a pause. Then, "You hear them too, don't you?" Morales said. The whispers in the pipes, the breathing. Jackson's blood ran cold. He wanted to respond, but before he could, a sharp metallic clang echoed through the corridor. The sound of guards' baton hitting the bars. Quiet in the block. The vent went silent again. But something had changed that day. For the first time in years, someone had spoken back to the void. Days passed. Jackson couldn't stop thinking about that voice. Each night, when the lights dimmed, he'd wait for the hum of the vents, that faint mechanical whisper that was the only connection between the living and the forgotten. And one night, Morales spoke again. "You know why they built this place underground," he said. "Not to hold us. To erase us." Jackson wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew Morales was right. No sunlight, no sound, no faces, just a system that slowly made you forget who you were. Then Morales said something that made Jackson's skin crawl. "They made a mistake once. They locked the wrong man here. And he's still here." Jackson sat up, eyes wide. "Who?" But Morales didn't answer. Only static from the vents. The same metallic hum that filled every night remained. Then came a sound that didn't belong. A faint tapping. 1, 2, pause. 3, pause. 2. It was Morse code. Jackson didn't understand it at first. But after a week of hearing it night after night, he began to decode it using a scrap of paper from his food tray. The message was short, the same every time. "Look below." Below what? Jackson searched every inch of his cell. The floor was solid concrete, the drains sealed with rust and time. But near the corner, behind the toilet, he found something. A small patch of concrete that looked slightly darker, like it had been replaced. He pressed his fingers against it. It didn't move, but it was hollow underneath. That night, Jackson couldn't sleep. He kept staring at the spot, wondering what could be down there. By morning, Morales was gone. No sound, no voice, nothing. When Jackson asked through the vent, no one replied. A guard later told him Morales had been transferred to C Block. But everyone knew what that meant. C Block was where inmates wanted to vanish. Still, the message wouldn't leave his mind. Look below. Weeks later, during his daily 15-minute shower, his only moment outside the cell, Jackson saw something he wasn't supposed to. A section of the corridor floor, near the drainage pipes, had been pried open. Beneath it, a narrow passageway led downward into darkness. 2 guards were standing over it, speaking in low voices. Another one tried to dig to the foundation. One said, "They never learn." "Yeah," the other replied, but this one got deeper than the last. Jackson's heart started pounding. Morales. When they noticed him looking, one guard slammed the metal grate shut. "Eyes front," he barked. Jackson obeyed, but his mind was racing. Morales hadn't been crazy. He'd been digging. That night, Jackson couldn't stop thinking about what Morales said, about the wrong man, about erasure, and about the hole. He spent hours tracing the lines of his cell floor, counting the tiles, pressing every inch of the wall, listening for hollow sounds. Finally, under the corner of his bed, he heard it, a faint, hollow knock. His heart skipped. He grabbed the metal food tray from dinner and started scraping at the spot, slow enough to stay quiet, hard enough to chip the surface. Each scrape echoed like a heartbeat. By dawn, his fingers were bleeding, but he had carved out a small hole, just big enough to see darkness below. Something glimmered inside. He reached in and pulled out a small, rusted metal tag. Numbers were barely visible, but one line was clear. Inmate 002 Morales, C. Jackson froze. Morales had been in the system for years. But 002? That meant he wasn't just another prisoner. He was one of the first, which meant the story about the wrong man might be true. The next morning, guards entered his cell without warning. "Hands behind your back." Jackson complied, but before he could ask why, one guard leaned close and whispered, "You shouldn't have dug." Then the blindfold went over his eyes. He was dragged down a corridor, the sound of his own breathing echoing inside the fabric. He counted the turns, left, then right, then a long descent, like going underground. When they removed the blindfold, he was standing in a narrow hallway lit by flickering fluorescent lights. There were no windows, no sound, only a long row of sealed doors, each marked with a number and no name. At the end of the hall, a small plaque read, C Block, Restricted Access. Jackson's pulse thundered in his ears. The guard motioned him forward. Welcome to the end of silence, the guard said with a smirk. As the steel door clanged shut behind him, Jackson realized he had just stepped into the same place Morales had vanished to. And somewhere in the darkness, something was waiting. The room that doesn't exist. The first thing Jackson noticed inside C Block was the air. It was heavy, damp. It carried a smell that felt old, like dust and iron mixed with time itself. The corridor stretched endlessly, lit by lights that flickered as if even electricity was afraid to stay here. The guards led him to a door at the far end, numberless, painted gray like the rest. Without a word, they shoved him inside. When the door sealed, the silence hit him like a wave. It wasn't just quiet, it was perfectly still, so still that he could hear his heartbeat echo against the walls. Then he saw it. On the wall in front of him, carved into the concrete, were words, scratched by hand, uneven, desperate. No sun, no sound, no end. Beneath the carving, a single metal plate lay on the ground, the same type he found in his cell, and engraved on it, the same number, 002. But there were more. 003, 004, 005. Dozens of them, scattered in the dust, like the bones of forgotten names. Jackson knelt down and picked one up. The metal was cold, but the realization hit him hot. Every man who vanished from a block had ended up here, buried not under dirt, but under silence. That's when the speaker in the ceiling cracked to life. You've seen too much, inmate. The voice wasn't a guard. It was older, calm, controlled. This place was built to hold men beyond redemption, but some of them were never meant to be here. Jackson looked up. Who are you? The first warden. The voice said, I built Florence. I made sure no one ever escaped it, not even their memory. Jackson's throat went dry. Morales said they locked the wrong man here. He wasn't wrong, the voice replied, but it wasn't just one. A loud hum filled the room. The lights began to dim, one by one, until only the red emergency glow remained. Then, from a far wall, a small hatch opened, a file box sliding out. Inside it, a single folder labeled, Project Silence. Jackson opened it with shaking hands. Inside were mugshots, not criminals, men in suits, journalists, whistleblowers, people who'd vanished without a trace, each marked deceased, each assigned an inmate number, and at the bottom of the folder, a document stamped with a seal. U.S. Department of Corrections, confidential. He read the first line. ADX Florence serves as containment for individuals whose continued existence presents political, security, or societal risk. Jackson dropped the file. His pulse roared in his ears. This wasn't just a prison. It was a vault for the forgotten. Suddenly, the lights flared bright again. The door opened. A silhouette stood in the doorway, tall, thin, a guard with no name tag. You weren't supposed to find that, the man said quietly. Jackson clenched his fists. Then why show me? The guard paused. His voice softened. Because someone has to remember. He tossed a key card at Jackson's feet and whispered, Cell 002. There's something under the bed. That's where he left it. Then he turned and walked away. Jackson's body moved before his fear could stop him. He sprinted through the open hallway, the alarms echoing behind him, red lights flashing like warnings from hell. He reached Cell 002, Morales' cell. The bed was bolted down, but beneath it, hidden under a loose tile, he found it. A notebook, old, torn. The first page read, If you're reading this, I didn't make it, but you can. Inside were pages of scribbled notes, drawings of air ducts, corridors, maps of Florence's underground levels. Morales had spent years planning something no one had ever done before, an escape, and his final line read, Freedom doesn't start with running. It starts with remembering who you are. Jackson felt something inside him break open, not from fear, but from clarity. He tore the last page out, tucked it into his jumpsuit, and ran. Through the hall, through the hum of alarms, through doors that were supposed to stay locked forever. The last thing he heard as he neared the upper corridor was the sound of that same intercom voice again, quieter this time. "There's no outside world, Jackson. There's only the silence." But he didn't stop. They caught him before dawn. No one ever saw the footage. The official report said he tried to harm himself. That's what they always say. But days later, something strange happened. A journalist in Denver received an unmarked envelope. Inside, one torn notebook page. The ink was faded, the handwriting shaky, but the words were clear. Life inside ADX Florence. No Sunday. No sound. No end. And underneath, one final sentence. "Tell them we were here." Clapperboard outro. The truth that never dies. They say ADX Florence is the cleanest, quietest, most secure prison in the world. But silence has a way of hiding screams. No sunlight, no voices, no human contact. Some call it justice. Others call it slow erasure. Whatever you call it, it's still there, sitting under Colorado's sky, housing men the world has forgotten, and a few who were never meant to be forgotten at all. If you ever find yourself driving past the desert plains of Fremont County, and you see a stretch of land with no windows, no movement, and no sound, remember this story. Because even inside the quietest place on earth, the silence is still speaking.